Good evening, primetime partiers. It's primetime party time. Welcome back to our hour of all things media and entertainment, live on the air at 9 p.m. at ptptshow.com and on your time, wherever you stream podcasts. Tonight, we are rewatching and revisiting another cult followed and maybe a little bit less discovered show, Don't Trust the Bitch in Apartment 23, in our recurring segment, Ghosts of Primetime's Past. Daniel and I will give our toast and roast of this past week before getting into it and seeing what our favorite parts were from Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23. I'm Tracy, and this is our co-host,
Daniel. Hello, good evening, Tracy. How's it going?
It's good. Yeah, we were just saying, like, February is getting ahead of us.
Yes. Yeah, it's mid-February now, episode 7 of Primetime Party Time.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here. Nice to see y'all in the chat.
Absolutely, yeah. We're Ghost of Primetime's Past. Don't Trust the Bitch in Apartment 23, or the Bee in Apartment 23, as it's referred to on ABC. I don't know if that'll be the final episode title. It's a long show title as it is, so combining it with our show title, we'll see what metadata fields have to say there. But before that, we got Toast and a Roast. Tracy, what are you toasting to? What are you roasting to?
Yeah. So my main toast is, if you have not watched, I encourage you to watch Phoebe Bridgers' SNL performance, where I'd say, like, the first one, she does a song called Kyoto, and it's just like a really nice, calm performance. And then the second song, she straight up destroys a guitar, like rock and roll style. Like, she goes kind of screamo at the end of her like vocal solo, and then she just like is playing the guitar and then just smashes it, and you're just like, I did not see that coming. It's
not
fun.
Even a skit. Like, this is the SNL performance.
No, this is just like
okay. Right.
For real.
Shot.
Yeah.
All right.
In real time. So I was like, this is more shocking. Dan Levy also hosts, whom I love. And
sweet.
Then she also had like her like trademark is a lot of like skeleton like t-shirt, sweatshirt type situation. And she had one that was like pearl over a black dress, and it looked very, very badass. So that's my toast. It was really fun to see. It was also like definitely not what I expected. Like, I watched the first performance and was like, yeah, that was super nice. Really cool. Let's see the second one where they close it out. And then I was just like, oh, wow. We went like sparks flying off the amp situation. So I'm sure there was like a divided take on how people felt about that. I feel like every time I see people smash equipment, I do go into like $ tears and go, how so expensive.
Absolutely.
So nice. And then like later I'm like, she's fine, she has other guitars, she has other equipment. But I'm like, but waste, the waste of instruments and technology. It's like, it'll be okay. Sometimes people just gotta do it for rock and roll. So that was cool. I'd say my roast mostly is that I have like a newer iPhone, and on the days where I hold it more, definitely like pains the wrist a little bit. So, definitely like a privileged problem to have. But I also was like, man, do I have to start doing some yoga stretches, like increase my wrist strength to hold these phones, which I also have to have it in an industrial case because I'm a klutz and drop it all the time. The other roast, and I was going to see how you feel about it. How did you feel about the Matthew McConaughey Doritos commercial?
I was preparing food while that one aired, and
okay.
I mean, Matthew McConaughey, along with being a giant personality of film, an esteemed personality of film and television, is a commercial great. He's worked for the best, in the commercial space. And so, naturally, I will pay attention if he's on screen in a commercial. You never know, get a little bit of reffing, maybe. Who knows? That was strange. It was strange. But I was like half trying to balance a bunch of ingredients and half trying to see when he was going to inflate. What was the commercial?
It was Doritos, and it was like, he was like a Flat Stanley type character. Like, he was always in 2D, and he was having issues like the Roomba would try to suck him up, or like He'd go on
Scary.
talk shows and people would make fun of him. And then he ate these 3D Doritos because that's like the new thing. They're kind of like cheesy poofs,
Isn't that
but
just a
triangular, like
bugle?
kind of like bugles.
That's a
I
bugle.
know. We're also I kind of watched that too, like, and was like, don't you mean bugles?
Where's bugle? Where?
I guess they're technically not cones, but it's still kind of like it's a triangular shaped corn chip. I've
Hmm.
I've had this before. But
Wouldn't be
yeah, then
surprised
he
if.
gets stuck in the machine and he becomes 3D. I like some people like vehemently were like taking to the internet to complain about this. I didn't feel that strongly either way. Like I kind of was like, I see the take, like the 2D chips and living in 2D and then being like, everything's in 3D now and it's great. But it's like, I know a lot of people are like, but we're used to like Lincoln car commercial
Yeah. Oh yeah.
with him. So
So
I'm like, I get it.
is your roast that was the commercial that was discussed? Because that's not the commercial that I felt like would have been discussed. I kind of gave it to
Yes.
the
I
CEO in the field with his keyboard telling us about how great non-dairy milk was.
Okay, I loved the Oatly singer-songwriter commercial. Yeah,
Yeah.
like that's the thing is like I saw so much attention and I saw that he like apologized on like Twitter or something being like my bad about the commercial guys and I was kind of like I
It's
don't think you
bad.
really need to apologize for that one.
You got
Like
us talking.
maybe it wasn't like, numero uno, but like it was fine.
Yeah.
There were just other commercials that stuck with me a little bit more. I really liked the Will Ferrell one where he's like the Norwegians were like beating us at what was it? It was like at fuel efficiency or having
Uh-huh.
more electronic cars. And so then him and like Aquafina and someone else, I can't
I didn't get
remember.
that far into the commercial. I remember
Yeah,
walking out right as he appeared on screen, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna miss this one."
it was pretty funny. I liked that one a lot because they were all like racing and then they ended up in like Finland.
Oh, that's fun.
And then he was in
Okay.
they said like, "Oh, you're in Norway." And it was like, "No, you're in Sweden." And I'm pretty sure it must have been his wife because I know he married a Swedish woman because there was a show a long time ago that was like based in Sweden that I know he wrote and a lot of it had to do with that.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah.
I don't know if
I'll
I've heard
have
about
to-
that.
yeah. So, yeah, those were the commercials that stuck with me. But yeah, my roast is mostly that I was like, I don't know why this one got so much like buzz about being bad. When I was like, I thought it was fine.
Oh yeah, I did
I
too.
think the Oatly one is definitely one where I'm like, oh, that was pretty good.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. I enjoyed that one. That one was fun. That one was memorable. That is the one that I thought that we were going to come out writing articles about and everything.
Yeah.
Well, I am
So,
toasting the Super Bowl. Did you like the Super Bowl? Did you enjoy
I
it?
enjoyed it. I really liked all of well, I did like a lot of the music. I wasn't a huge fan of like Eric Church with Jasmine Sullivan. Like I kind of thought like she
Yeah,
could
when did that
like
happen?
he was like accompanying her but like kind of duetting her,
Oh,
but
okay.
then she would just like go
I feel
above
like I
and
missed half
beyond to
the
like
Super Bowl.
a Whitney Houston national anthem and you were kind of like that guy should just like play the guitar. Like it's fine.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's a hot take. There's probably some people who really love his music. I'm not like I feel very neutral towards him,
Mm.
but I really like her. So that's why. And speaking of her, loved her's performance of America the Beautiful. That was great. And I enjoyed the weekend. The only thing was like his mic was not loud enough. That's
Yeah,
the only
noticed that.
thing that I
Okay.
would say. I'm like, there were times where I'm like, is it my TV? And then realized later, like, nope, it's the mixing, which that just happens during performances, even at big stadiums. Sometimes it's just like, you never know until you're in it. But I think he did a really good job. People are also making a lot of memes of that, but I was like, I enjoyed it a lot.
Well, memes aren't inherently bad. You
That's
can make
true.
memes
A
if you
lot of
enjoy
them were very
things.
loving.
Yeah, I saw some loving weekend memes. I didn't see any. I don't know. Well,
I don't think any of them
maybe they're
were
yet to come. Maybe they
critical.
come in waves. Maybe
They
memes come in
do.
waves.
Okay, so I will fact check myself on the
Oh,
Swedish sitcom of that is
oh,
related to
yes.
Will Ferrell, but it's actually created by Greg Polar and it's called Welcome to Sweden. and there were 2 seasons in 2014 and 2015.
Oh, that's nice.
So I don't know if he really actually had. I don't think he had any relation to this show. I think he might have guest starred.
Okay.
I know. I was like, this definitely is a bit more with Amy Poehler. Oh no, he does guest star in the second episode. All right, this was not
Okay.
completely off base.
No, but we made it. We made it. And we fact checked.
We
So
made
that's
it.
good.
We fact checked that. We can do that. But yeah, it was like a fun, just like it's pretty much like a guy like uproots himself from America and goes to Sweden. It was cute. I
That's
liked
nice.
it. I like Sweden though. So definitely biased. One of my favorite places to travel when we can do things like that. But yeah, Daniel, your toast and roast.
Yeah, I enjoyed the Super Bowl. I thought it was a fun, interesting game. Though I will say, I guess my real toast this week is that so when I was a young child, I really wanted a pet, and my parents were like, "No dogs, no cats." And so I was like, "Well, what about an iguana?" And they're like, "No, absolutely not." But we can compromise. Let's get you a tortoise. Now, I still have this tortoise, and he hibernates, sometimes in December, misses Christmas. But this week he came back out, and he came back out in force, and he hangs out at my parents' house. My mom loves him and still loves to take care of him. And he's got that like post hibernation energy, that early. He hasn't gotten to that like, past that I'm not doing my resolution anymore kind of thing. He is at full speeds. He's passed out like upright, one arm slumped on his log, at the end of the day, and you're just like, all right, man, you're killing it. I need to take some notes.
Like a large tortoise?
No, this is a Russian tortoise. So it's tiny. You can hold it in your hands. It is one of the it's like a Petco-sized tortoise, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Got it. Yeah. I do remember as a child having like some neighborhood friend who had like the really gigantic ones, like multiples in the backyard. Have no idea how that was allowed, but it was kind of cool. But it was like as a kid, you like looked at it and was like, they have like mini dinosaurs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
Which is also how I view tortoises. That is pretty cool. I like that your tortoise pops out like Groundhog's Day.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Hibernation's over. It's time for me to come out.
Yep. Yeah. He's still great. And yeah. And so yeah, that's my toast. I will say what I'm roasting tonight is the process of apartment hunting. It is time.
You looking for new lodgings?
I've got a wonderful spot here on the beautiful LA River.
Yes.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
If anyone's ever been. So majestically.
It's a wonderful, wonderful piece of nature. And hallmark of LA. And I might still stay on it. I'm not really sure here. But I am looking, and it does remind me how many bedrooms don't quite look like bedrooms in the apartment landscape, and how many times a place could seem perfect and just has something crazy wrong, like a red flag, It's a lot like dating apartment hunting. And right now, putting myself out there, I'm seeing what's going on in the apartment hunting sphere, and it's reminding me of all the previous times. But yeah, that is definitely my roast tonight.
It's not a fun process. And, it's great when you get there. But yeah, the matchmaking of desired neighborhood, price point, and space is just like getting that trifecta together.
It's tough.
It's tough. It's like getting to different levels. You got to acquire like each piece to unlock the next, and it's just not fair. We do have a chat coming in from guest 5169 saying M. Night Shyamalanga Ding Dong. But yes, there was also in the Super Bowl a preview for an M. Night Shyamalan movie. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
I missed all of this.
Oh, it's like a horror movie about aging. Like they all go on to like a vacation to some island, and it's like that they're getting older a lot faster.
Okay.
So I'm like, interesting. We'll see how this goes. I did watch the one that had the multiple personalities. I think that's the last one I watched.
I hear good things about that one.
I
haven't seen one in a while.
Oh, Some guest continues to say it looked neat. They go to a beach.
Yeah, very nice.
Coming in with the short
Split
but
was
sweet yet
the one that you
accurate
watched.
notes.
Thanks to
So,
guest 5169.
oh yes, the movie was Split
Hmm.
for split personalities. So yeah, that one's good. It sticks with you because it's a little scary, but it's a nice mix. Speaking of nice mixes, for tonight we have crafted some at-home mimosas because one of the episodes we like the most from Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23 is a brunch episode hosted by Eric Andre. So we decided, since many of the substances of choice that Chloe partakes in are not one that one would partake in on a weeknight or at all. So the greatest beverage that seemed to fit the show was a at home evening mimosa, because one thing throughout the show is they're always drinking at bizarre hours. So this is another one for us where we have like a 9:15 p.m. mimosa. So cheers, Daniel.
Cheers, Tracy. It's brunch. And we'll be right back to talk more about Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23. Okay, what is this show, Tracy?
What is this show? Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23 is a comedy. It's created by Nanchaka Khan, known for Fresh Off the Boat and Always Be My Maybe. It aired April 11th, 2012 until May 17th, 2013 on ABC, but it was originally developed for Fox for 2009. The cast is pretty stacked. It's Kristen Ritter as a star as Chloe the Bee in Apartment 23. Then we have Dreama Walker as June Colburn. She's the kind of new implant to New York City that learns the ways via the devious Chloe. James Van Der Beek, who plays himself but just elevated up many notches, and it's hilarious to see. And Eric Andre plays the love interest slash co-worker of June. So this show ran 2 seasons, 26 episodes, and there's more to the details of this show. And Daniel, would you like to tell us more about kind of the sequence of production here?
Yeah, this was interesting. So when we kind of research these episodes, we go to a number of sources. We'll start, on like IMDb and Wikipedia and kind of build out from there. And it's funny, for this show, the Wikipedia page is written by a fan who has a little bit of sass. And for what seems like good reason, this series was aired completely out of order. And is still out of order if you were to watch syndication on a streaming platform like Netflix or Hulu.
Wow.
We watched this one on Hulu. I did.
Yeah, same.
Basically, like the season episode run goes, season 1 is 7 episodes, aired out of order, and then season 2 is like 19 episodes. But it should really add up to 13 and 13. As far as how they were produced. And so weirdly enough, certain season 1 episodes end up in season 2, and it's very, very strange. So you'll see a lot of like the running plots start not to make sense. You'll see some recurring characters kind of come and go
in and out.
ways that are
Yeah.
unnatural. And yeah, it's just completely shot as far as that goes. And for whatever reason, it was never fixed. When the series actually ended its lifespan. Also, it was canceled mid-airing, and so the last 8 or so episodes didn't air until 4 or 5 months after the show was taken off the schedule. So all around, it's just a mess. Absolute mess to try to watch this show.
When I was rewatching it, especially the second season, there were episodes that I did not remember because I had never seen them, because they cut it off
when we were watching
halfway
it.
through. And it's very jarring.
Yeah.
So we'll recap the series plot in case you guys haven't seen this. Thank you, Daniel, for putting this together. But it's basically Friends. If everything went horribly wrong and Monica was a stranger from hell and Gunther actually got to be the love interest, that is pretty spot on.
Yeah,
Uh,
and if Joey were Joey, the episodes version. I don't know if you've ever seen
yes,
episodes, but it was a
I have not.
Showtime. It's a Showtime show that aired. It probably started airing just before this show did, and it's Matt LeBlanc playing himself, much like James Vanderbeek plays himself,
Mm,
and it's a lot of like Matt LeBlanc trying to capture the glory days of Friends and his stunted career, and he
ah,
plays a very like parody, kind of eccentric version of himself in a certain way, an exaggerated version of himself. In this show, I guess James Vanderbeek is one of Chloe's best friends. So the pilot episode, much like the Friends pilot episode, is June, our Rachel, coming to New York
yeah.
City, though I guess Rachel already lived in New York City. But I don't know what I kind of saw it as. I don't know if this is true or not. Is I saw it like a generational kind of spin on Friends, where it's like instead of Rachel being the housewife who's just about to get married, June is the hardworking girl coming out from the suburbs of Indiana, which may or may not be like a more 2010 version of a 1994 Rachel. And Steven, like Barry doesn't, he has commitment issues, but his version of commitment issues are, he's a serial cheater instead of,
Yeah.
well, I guess Barry might have been a cheater too as well, but not as
Yeah.
I don't know, I like to
Not
think
as
that,
extensive as obviously he was.
yeah, I like to think that the series is like really nihilistic in a way that a lot of 2010s humor was. Maybe we just didn't feel like we could fix anything, or I don't know, we were just wallowing. It's kind of what it feels like to me.
It's
Uh,
very it's weird because in a lot of ways it's cynical in having these characters that have a lot of toxic negative traits, but then you're also seeing a lot of Chloe's character grow and do things that are kind of immature. Ultimately, she's someone who like loves to live in taking the low road, but in order to do these really nice gestures for the very few people who are in her inner circle.
very few.
So it's pretty much June and James Vanderbeek, but that's like that's at the core. Is like she'll do all of these schemes and con artist moves, but even in the first episode, she gets June's boyfriend to like make out with her and cheat on her in order to prove this guy is a cheater. I could sense it. But so she's very manipulative, but she has like almost like this Robin Hood sense of manipulating other
That's a good
people
way to
that
put
she
it.
can sense are similar to herself. So I thought that was funny. I also got a lot of like elf Kimmy Schmidt vibes from June's character, but it's a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Like she comes from the Midwest, she has no idea what she's in for. She kind of has like a job and apartment set up for her that all fall through, but she does have this like doe-eyed look on. I moved to the big city and all of these, I'm supposed to have this like Sex in the City like experience, but then they're crushed with more of the reality of rent. Like a lot of their episodes are about making the rent and having money and them both not coming from really wealthy backgrounds, which I think is what's funny about comparing the show with Friends,
That's
where
true.
they like have maybe one episode where they address the wealth inequalities between the characters, whereas this show is like every episode is about them like how do we get them bills paid? How do we afford to go see our families for the holidays? Like little
Yeah.
things like that. So I agree. I agree. There's a lot of it's a lot of like different parts of other shows, but then very distinctive writing take
Yeah.
on it and speed. But like you do get that anytime there's an apartment show in New York City, it's going to get compared to the other New York City apartment shows.
Of
So
course, of course. But yeah, this one's it does kind of stop with the premise, so to speak, right?
yeah, I think so because a ton of it has to do with like poking fun at media and Hollywood a lot. Like they have a lot of guest stars that play themselves up a notch, similar to James Vanderbeek. And we'll talk about more in other episodes, but they take down like tabloids. They have, the comic book / graphic novel that's based on Chloe. And they like, to get into our own show's theme, they roast like everything, like actors, them going on to being on Dancing with the Stars, and like caring about this person's dressing room was 6 inches more than mine. Like, they just have all these little details that are really funny. And I also think the plot, like, they make really quick dialogues to flip things on their heads throughout the episodes. I think, yeah, and I do agree with a lot of this episode structure is in the how good can be written as bad. And as you say, like, what makes this awful situation a happy ending to the episode you're about to watch. They do, despite this show having a lot of like schemes and devious planning, they do always kind of end on a bright note.
Yeah, it's
So,
like, despite how cynical everybody is, and especially Chloe, the question at the end of the first episode is like, how is this going to be a show, and how is Chloe going to be someone that we care about? And when you get these like sort of cold open tags that are like, oh wow, like this is terrible, this is a nightmare, and then the show actually shows you a bunch of context to how it's like, wait, no, Chloe's not in the wrong in this scenario.
yeah, like showing
kind of
June
beauty.
going like, this is the best thing and nicest thing anyone's ever done to me, is shown me that the guy I dated since I was 14 has actually been a douchebag, and all of my other friends and family just sat there quietly, and you showed him for who he was, so I didn't waste any more time. I was like, not everyone would react this way, but I liked that they were showing this take. They were also showing, like, this show is really good about showing a strong female friendship without it being cliche, and things like that, where it's like, she didn't get mad at Chloe really for doing anything. She immediately got mad at the Steven character for being like, I can't believe you've been, out cheating on me a bunch, and didn't really point any of her anger at the other women, which you see in a lot of other shows. So I think that is a big part. And they do play up kind of female friendships and relationships more in the season 2 episodes. But let's get into our histories with the show, which interestingly enough is shared.
Yeah, I don't know. You might have. I don't even. I can't fill in the blanks on this, but I watched this at. We watched this in our hometown. We watched this at your parents' place with other friends.
Yeah.
Much like friend of the show,
Yeah.
Kyle. Another friend, Corey, must have been there. Like, I have vague memories of us watching this show around the time it was airing. I don't know anything else.
Yeah. So, good friend of the pod, Corey, we're always introducing each other to great, especially comedy TV shows and movies. And this is definitely one that she recommended. And I do know that, like, once we find a show we're a little obsessed with, we kind of try to make everyone watch it. And we'll like keep
town over. And grab
we'll just
mimosa.
hound them and be like, you're watching this, you're watching this, you're watching this. And eventually, if we're all together, it's like, what are we watching? It's like, we're going to watch this show I kept reminding you to see. So that's probably what happened. I don't fully remember why we were all together and watched this show.
We went to different colleges, so there's no way we're getting anything productive done.
No. Yeah, this was definitely a winter break goof off scenario.
Perfect.
So,
and it's interesting because I haven't revisited this one since.
No, not really.
But
I think maybe here and there, but I haven't sat down and watched like seasons.
Yeah, I think about it here and there, but it's one of those shows, like many move to the city in your 20s shows, that is really interesting after you move to the city in your 20s, or just like get that, hit that 25, whatever that life experience is. A big theme of this show is like June is very much someone with a life plan, and as that life plan very quickly falls apart in the pilot episode, a lot of the show is how much of her New York life, how much of Chloe is like beneficial to her growth as a person, how much is letting go of her life plan, like something that she needs to do in order to grow as a person, and how much is like comparing herself to others who have gone further down their life plans, and just like the overall kind of like conflict one has in that sphere, and that I found very relatable. I found June to be a rather relatable character.
I think so. She has an idea of how she wants her life to go, and then it takes a completely different direction, and she is a little bit lost. Like, it's just how can she get a job? How can she make rent? How can she find a new partner? And she like puts a lot of pressure on herself to kind of make things on a timeline that you do see as she spends more time with Chloe. She starts to let go of these, I have to reach this milestone by this age. Just kind of organically, you can see her wanting to live in the moment more like Chloe, even though Chloe's the big extreme. And she even does kind of go like, I don't need to be as like party girl extraordinaire as Chloe, but she enjoys being in her presence. And I feel like, yeah, even if it's not the character you relate with the most, I feel like I've had those friends that are very like fixed on a plan. And when that either doesn't seem like it's going to happen or things change, they are kind of like left going like, what do I do now? And then they make it work. And so that's what I think is like the earnest kind of heartwarming part of this show is watching June kind of go, all right, my new life is my New York City life with Chloe. And what does that mean for me and my greater life goals? And she kind of leaves things a little bit more open ended than she did when she arrived.
Yeah.
So
You know,
I like that a lot.
I do too. I agree. But as much as we have been talking about this show as having like these wholesome themes and being so earnest, episode to episode, the actual contents, we did mention it. It is a very
Oh, yeah.
cynical show. And it's a little
Yes.
wild for network, so I guess we can get into like what we watched to review this show and to check it out.
Yeah, it does not feel like a network show. It does not feel like an ABC show when you compare with other shows that were airing on during that time. It does not fit the bill for better and for worse. Like it's its own entity. And it's interesting to see because I think definitely now you could see it in that same kind of class of like Arrested Development, where it was so different than everything on the air. But then in the streaming world, it really thrives.
Right, of course,
And
yeah.
I see that. I see that too. I mean, very different show concepts and themes, but it's one of those where you're like, one of these things is not like the other. This is not like a Grey's Anatomy type show,
Right.
or a lot, or like Modern Family, or any of those sitcoms. It's its own kind of really dark comedy, really not family friendly. And it's a lot about like going out and being your worst self, but for the right reasons. In a
Yeah,
lot of ways,
definitely.
it's like letting go of a lot of inhibitions, but it's also like Chloe has her own moral compass, even if like the direction of where it goes is not on par with, say, like June's. Like it's just like they have different ideas of what a normal Monday would entail. And it's fun to see the contrast of it, honestly, because June comes in with like a gotta get another Wall Street job as an analyst, and Chloe is very much on the just kind of figuring it out and doing different shenanigans. So I'd say all of season one is them getting their chemistry together as roommates. You're getting an idea of the kind of games they like to play on each other and other people. I think one of my favorite moments is, I think it's in like the second episode, but like Chloe wants to set up June with someone else after she breaks up with her boyfriend. She's like, I know this guy. He'll be great. He's a little bit older, but it's fine. And so she sets him up with this cyclist. Everything's going well. And then he like decides to like stay the night. And then as they're about to go to sleep, like Chloe's character goes like, night dad, and he goes, night princess, and then you just see her face go, what? And the eyes bulge, and I'm like, that's the kind of stuff that makes me love this show. Is like you don't really see any of it coming, and then there's just like a quick line, and then you're like, this whole situation that you had like gone like, okay, she just set her up with someone, no big deal. It just flips.
It's the same as like, how can the bad thing be good? It's like, how can the good thing be bad? And yeah, in this case, it's Chloe setting her roommate up with her father. And this is one of the like few episodes that is programmed correctly as episode 2. This actually was episode 2. And it is like a great continuation of the pilot. And it does do really well to like not only one show where June is in her life, but also it flips it onto Chloe, and actually like a lot of the episode is like why Chloe's setting them up, and like Chloe's strained relationship with her mother, who like can't help it in a really hilarious way, that both her and her father are annoyed at. But yeah, and so, you know, she's wheelchair bound, and so she's not able to give Chloe the experiences that Chloe wanted as a child, or her father the experiences that he wants, and so they're both trying to get away from this helpless woman. And then they actually do go and really dive into like Chloe's psyche about like why that is, and you know, as they kind of unravel this plot of June having to date her father. It's fun, it's dynamic. It was one of my favorite episodes that I watched.
And they revisit it in the second season.
They did,
where, yeah. They take Chloe takes June home for Thanksgiving, and it's so funny. She like says, "Hey, so my mom knows about you having a fling with my dad, and they, you know, worked things out, and they're together again. So to get her to like you more, she's like, I'm gonna have you go in a wheelchair." Which, you know, there's moral implications of that being horrible. But June kind of just goes along with it, being like, you're right, we'll like bond over this, it makes sense. And the mom was true, like she did bond with her and go like, oh, this is great, all this stuff. And the whole time the dad is avoiding her, and you think like, oh, this has to do with like her being in the wheelchair and her dad having like issues like confronting that block. But then you find out later it's because he never told Chloe's mom about the fling with June, and then there's just like a Thanksgiving table just blowout of finding out all this information, and they find out that, you know, June's faking it in the wheelchair, and then they kick her out. But at the end of that episode, Chloe says like, hey, my parents gave me money to find a new roommate because you clearly to them seemed like way too much drama, but you can use that money to go see your parents for Christmas since I know you couldn't afford to fly home. So it's like, it's really weird because they'll have these like crazy just like scenarios that all come out of these little like lies and plots and manipulations. But then like at the end of it, there's always the like, but I did this for you. Here you go. And that's what keeps this show interesting. I think the only network aspect of this show is that it ends on a happy note at the end of each episode.
Yeah.
I'd say that's like very different from the Kristen Ritter character we see in Jessica Jones, where almost every episode is kind of like a intense, like darker themes. And they said before she was on this show, she was on Breaking Bad.
Yeah, that would have been right before.
Too.
Mm-hmm. Or
yeah,
by a couple of years.
So
later.
This is her main, besides Veronica Mars, where she guest starred a bit. Like you get to really see her use her comedy chops throughout the show, and they're really good. I think that's the one thing when you watch the show, you're like, I want her to do another comedy.
Yes,
this
absolutely,
hilarious. Yeah. Like, and especially this character where she's like gets to be so big, so extreme, like the worst. But you know, also we got some chats coming in. Just the Fact says Chloe's mom never took her ice skating or horse riding. Yeah, that is one of the complaints she has in the episode. It's part of why you'll see Chloe's character and be like, well, of course she didn't. That's like, you know, she has these very like self-centered and self-indulgent tendencies, and you're kind of like, when you watch it, you're like, this mom seems pretty cool. And does
essentially,
still is doing a lot despite like, you know, her physical limitations, but
yeah.
it's interesting seeing Chloe's perspective
I
and
don't
how she treats her parents accordingly.
I don't remember the exact delivery of the joke, probably for the betterment of the show, but much like Just the Facts is a great character line moment in Die Hard 2, this is a great character moment for Chloe in Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23, episode 2. One thing that does kind of make the show a little networky, perhaps something that I always thought about while watching it, is that Eric Andre plays the straight man of the show in a sense, the love interest in a sense, even like potential. I did see later on that they actually do explore that in quite depth. But it's interesting because he's so restrained in this show.
Yes.
There were so many times where he's put into a crazy situation, and now knowing his career, you're just like, well, I'm waiting for the punchline that he's pulling the strings here. I'm waiting for that, like, whip zoom in, but we never get it. It's so strange.
There's so many times on this show where you're waiting for him to just come out with one of his outbursts or one-liners, and he keeps it all in. And his character is like really normal in a way. Like he's a barista / he also was a financial analyst with June. And like besides like every once in a while he gets a little bit of a quip, you don't really see him get to be the stand-up comedian / talk show host that we now know him on the Eric Andre show to be. And it's interesting. And he's been a love interest on Two Broke Girls, and he got to be a lot more of an eccentric and oddball character on that show, where he's like a pastry school partner of the Kat Dennings character, but then you find out later that he re-outfitted a like storage unit / dumpster to be at his apartment, but it's like really well thought out, and so it's pretty funny.
And since we are talking about this show and Eric Andre on the weekend before Valentine's Day, do not miss him in the Michael Bolton's Big Sexy Valentine's Day special.
Oh my gosh.
That's all. That's as BMAC reminds us. That's really all there is to say there. If you haven't seen that, that's definitely the one to watch this weekend.
I mean, you should honor that holiday with that performance.
Absolutely. One of the episodes that he does get to sort of be Eric Andre in a character way, in the character of Mark Way, is when his girlfriend breaks up with him, and he does kind of get to like, it's one of those things where he was changing for her, and now you get to see like the real Mark come out, the real Eric Andre character come out. And
that's true.
That's why we're drinking mimosas, is because his big first great event as being single is to throw a brunch.
It's super funny. He has all these like, parameters to brunch. Like I remember like 2 people drop out and he's like, 4 people, that's not a brunch. That's like a casual breakfast. And then 2 people more in, he's like, you can't stop brunch. Brunch is happening. And then he also has like these lines about when he is dating the girlfriend, where I think her name is like Julia, but he'll say, is that her name? Yeah, I think, but he'll say like these things like, oh, I gotta take her. Normally I have to take her cats hiking, but since we broke up, I get to have brunch. Or when June starts going to the Korean church, he says something like, oh yeah, Julia's not into God. She thinks it takes away focus from the relationship. And you're just like, those are the lines where you're like, this is Eric Andre, because they're all like really like, this girlfriend you have is like another level.
Absolutely.
But the brunch episode is great. So context is that Chloe's character goes to the apartment building meetings, which she normally doesn't do, but she has to do because there's a new person moving in with a minor, and she has to announce that she is a registered sex offender, which everyone is just like, they really do pull out all the things where it's like, can you believe this character has gotten into this much trouble and been on the wrong side of the law on like everything? But it's like, no, just you wait. There's more. And so it's all about the episode's called The Scarlet Neighbor because the neighbors then all start to think that their apartment is, full of floozies and such because of this. So, yeah, it's actually kind of similar to a Sex in the City episode where like Samantha has a one night stand and there's like a robber that breaks in with the doorman when they let in her one night stand, and then all of the co-op apartment people like turn on her. So it's funny to see that. Like she is very much like that kind of character. But yes, the big part of this is that they have a brunch and Eric Andre's character really wants to have a relationship with June, hopefully. He's kind of been crushing on her for a while. And he kind of sets up the brunch to kind of like test the waters and see. All while June is trying to set him up with Chloe's character. And Chloe's character is kind of into it, but she's like, he seems too like a actual guy I could date. Like I'm usually only attracted to like the wrong guys for me. And then she realizes that he has a crush on Jude. She's like, oh, so even though you're a great dude, you are not someone I could date because you should be dating June. And
James Vanderbeek, who does not want to lose Chloe to an authentic relationship with Eric Andre's character, decides to find the 17-year-old kid in the building crushing on Chloe.
Yes. And so he invites him to the brunch, which then throws Eric Andre's character off Mark because he's like, oh, now we have an odd numbered brunch. It's hilarious. Yeah. It's one of my favorite episodes because of all of the like neuroses of brunch. I feel like I could relate to that. And all of the different subplots of like who's going to date who and who is very wrong for each other on many levels. Another great season 2 episode is the Sexiest Man Alive episode. It's basically June has this history of being obsessed with whoever gets voted People Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive. And James Vanderbeek's character really wants to be voted Sexiest Man Alive. So what Chloe does is she marches into People Magazine and pretends like she owns the place. And in her words, she's like, oh yeah, I've taken over a bunch of companies. What you do is you fire the first person that questions you, fire the second person that questions you, then you draw a peen on the board. And then she's like, and then you just work there for a while. And she really gets comfortable at People Magazine. It's also just like poking fun at it because it's showing that she can like kind of like, infiltrate the organization easily by like doing a lot of like corporate jargon and, just like putting people in their places in like these obscene HR atrocious ways. And yeah, there's especially like a girl named Brenda where she just like pokes on her the whole time. But in the end, the higher ups overrule her trying to make James the cover. But the whole while he is like in the running for it, June is kind of like over the moon, kind of can't even like see him as a regular person because she's always had this like, enamoring, obsession with who is this year's Sexiest Man Alive. But it's also funny because he ends up getting a full spread where he's like shirtless horseback riding in the magazine anyway. And he's like, I'll take it. But there's a lot of things where it's like his assistant Luther and Chloe's character, do all these shenanigans, try to make things work for him. And even if they don't work out, he'll sometimes just be like, yeah, that's fine. And you definitely see them act kind of as his like agents-ish for all these little things. And even true when he does the dancing with the stars, which is funny. There's a lot of things that are like funny because it's true of him like trying to like kind of get back into more acting roles, and you really do see actors in real life do exactly what he does on the show. So and they keep it really on par too when he does his dancing with the stars. episode, they have his nemesis's partner played by someone who actually was on Dancing with the Stars at the time. So they're pretty smart with keeping a lot of the like industry jokes very realistic, if not like actually reality. So I think there is a fun play in general with the show of like they are very cynical, but it's not always really off base with what actually happens in real life. They just like heighten it up a lot.
Wait,
Like,
so they heighten up a lot. I want to know because I'm seeing
mhm.
there's always truth behind the cynicism. That's what makes it earnest, right?
Yeah.
So anyone from the suburbs, like anybody buy into this People Magazine "Sexiest Man Alive" stuff? Is that something that you might have followed as a teen? That joke
I
like hit you
know.
in the.
That's the I wonder if that's true. As people who grew up in San Diego, which even though our towns are
We're
definitely
not
within
quite
the
Indiana.
suburbs of that, where it's not the same.
Mm-mm.
And I definitely never really followed the heartthrobs of People Magazine or
Did you
Tiger
watch Dawson's
Beat.
Creek?
Not didn't even watch Dawson's Creek. I mean, this might be a shocker, but I've also never watched Titanic.
Oh,
So
really?
I,
Like you
I
like
really didn't
we
go for
were
like the heartthrob content.
we were in school when that movie was popular. I can't tell you how many like faculty made us like dress up and like get a little plastic boat and sing the songs. And was that just my school?
Yeah, my elementary school didn't have
That
us do
was
that.
like
I
required
watched
reading
the
or watching.
Thumbtanic,
The
which they
Thumbtanic
reenact it with
with
the,
thumbs on what
CGI
platform?
thumbs. So I
Wait,
got the short
wait,
version
what
of
platform
the
was this?
plots. It's I think Steve Odekirk did all those thumb
Oh
movies.
my
So there's
god,
like Thumb Wars and Thumbtanic. Yeah.
fantastic!
So I saw that, so I understand what happens. I also understand the historical context of
That's
Titanic,
another
but
good. Yeah, yeah.
I just didn't watch the full length movie because I
Hmm.
just didn't have that like, oh yeah, I gotta watch the Leonardo DiCaprio film.
Oh yeah,
Which
okay.
I
You're
know
not too
I'm sure there'll be a
heartthrob.
lot of people who are like, you have watched so many movies. You are a class short of being a film major. How did you not watch Titanic?
It's
And
an
like
interesting one to
fair
admit.
judgment. Fair judgment indeed.
Hmm.
But getting back to season 2,
Mm-hmm.
beyond the People Magazine shakedown, which is great to watch, Chloe going corporate mode is hilarious. I feel like just in that kind of same way, like you see a lot of people who just like really go power hungry, like going on some rants. Like she really does that to a T, and it's great. But another episode that's also workplace related is when June eventually does get a job on Wall Street, and she has this nemesis as soon as she begins called Fox Paris. And Chloe's character says all this funny stuff like, she asked you about your life, your hometown. Does she wear a wig? She's like, she's your enemy. She's not your friend. And that ends up being true. And it's super funny to watch. Like, there's just like a lot of this show is all these adult life moments, but without the adult maturity. So there's all these like wars going on. Like, she's at war with this coworker who's like
Mm-hmm.
trying to sully her reputation with the boss. And this coworker's also out to get her and try to bond with Chloe. And it all ends up backfiring in the end in a really funny way where you see um, this girl tries to get June to cut all the pieces of the cake for the boss's birthday. And June pushes back. She's like, I'm not doing it. And the girl keeps like handing her the knife and she's like, she'll do it. And she's like, no. She's like, I'm going to tell him, like, you didn't, give money for the gift or the cake or anything, like all this stuff. Like, I'm going to ruin your time here. And she's like, no. And eventually, like, the girl keeps handing June the knife and then someone bumps her into it where it's basically like June actually stabs this girl in the back, which is funny for both like the metaphorical reason and also because you're just like, this character would never do that for real. But the other girl, like after that, goes like, whoa, no, and backs off. But it's very funny to just see, it's seeing June's character growth maybe not upwards, but like her standing her standing up for herself, but also her being like, I need backup. Like I do need my manipulative roommate who's not afraid to, you know, leave the moral high ground for tomorrow and just take this girl out. And then instead Chloe's like, oh, I see one of my people. I'm gonna bond with this girl. And then later, you know, she ends up sticking up for herself in more ways than one. And then I just think it's funny because they kind of show her being like a backstabber, even though that's couldn't be farther than her actual character. But that's what ends up happening. And it's a pretty strong episode in a lot of ways. Like
Yeah,
you
this one
get
was
to
a fun
see
one.
June actually getting her job like she wanted, even though she got the job because like Chloe hooked up with the owner of the company's son, I think, or that might have been another workplace. But you know, there's a lot of ways where she networks by like partying with Chloe, which I think is funny. It's kind of like a means to an end that is like I'm getting to still bond with my roommate who's like one of the cool girls, quote unquote, and then like getting to also get to those life plan goals that I wanted to. And the other episode that I think worth mentioning before we get into our own roommate dynamics that are reminiscent in this show is that there's one where it's called the Mean Girls, and it's where Chloe and June have been hanging out a lot. But June wants to make Chloe dinner, but Chloe's like, whoa, 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 we're roommates, not friends. So then Chloe gets a bunch of Pilates girlfriends. This is also when, you know, they take like a New York City bus tour of all the like crime scenes in the city. And, you know, Chloe's character is like reveling in it. And then it ends up being like she gets this group of girls, which she thinks is really great. And Chloe kind of goes and dissects all of them and goes like, this girl's actually has this motive, this motive. And she finds the queen bee and she's like, there's only room for one bitch in apartment 23, which is also a great line to be like, haha, you've signaled the title. But
well, you said that
yeah,
this
get to
episode
it.
you said that this episode was in season 2.
Yes.
This episode was produced as season 1, episode 3.
Wow. And it really does kind of fit that vibe. Like you do see this episode in the second season going like, wow, they've gone a long time like hanging out for them to kind of reach this point of like, are we roommates or are we friends? It doesn't completely fall out of line of what's going on in the show because
it's
you kind of
for
are like,
comedy.
well, like Chloe's a different kind of character. She might take a while to warm up to being in a committed friendship the same way she would in a committed relationship. But I also see how it would fit being a third episode because you would kind of think like girl moves into a new city from nowhere. Does she just like not try to join any organizations or clubs to make friends? She's like, no, I'm just going to settle on my roommate. It's great. I'm good.
Yeah.
So it's like she is everything. I need nothing else. I'm fine. So I could see that. I could see both. It's fun though because you do see another iteration of them showing the strength of June and Chloe's friendship while also showing tropes of like kind of stereotypical like girl versus girl meanness that can happen in female friendships, but they do kind of show Chloe and June's friendship prevailing outside of it. And then they kind of end the episode on a dark note with they take, you know, this, you know, murder bus tour of New York City of like all the places there've been huge crimes and murders. And it ends up with one of the Pilates girls ending up being like, we found this body in the park. And the rest of the episode is June thinking Chloe did it because she comes in late one night and then she's like, I gotta just like burn these clothes. They just like don't smell good anymore and all these like sketchy details, but she's doing it on purpose to mess with June. So it's funny because they also get to like part of that episode is Chloe going like, oh, I didn't realize I could play games with my friends, you know, mess with them like this. and that makes me really want to have June as a friend. But it's a lot of her taking, the bad side of things in order to get to this warm, earnest, happy ending, which is why we like this show.
It's true. And if you do like get all the way to the end of the show, Chloe does come around. Like the actual like final episode of the show does kind of work as a final episode, and it is very Chloe centric about growing as a person and
Yeah.
finally kind of like you know letting June into her life, because the whole point of Chloe is that she, as a Craigslist roommate, likes to scam her roommates out of first, last, and deposit and get them out as soon as possible with their awful behavior. June just has the resilience you need to be a TV show protagonist.
Yes. I also love that a big part of this show is like the Craigslist roommate, which is really topical. It's still valid now.
Oh yeah.
But that is another way why this show is kind of like a revamp of the typical like 90s and otherwise like New York City apartment life, because it's like you found them on Craigslist. You guys are kind of scrambling to make rent. You're getting into all these crazy antics that are still possible. Like the New York City as a character is still consistent throughout like all these shows, as they get to go out all the time, run into celebrities, like all the different celebrity guest stars on the show that play themselves. Like I think my two, maybe three favorites are Kieran and Shipka's character playing herself, because her and James Vanderbeek are going to be like in a body swapping movie where he has to play like a tween girl. It's really funny because she plays the straight man in it, and he's the one being kind of like annoying and giddy and sitting cross-legged exactly how she is and mimicking everything she does and being just like kind of like, I'm not touching you, did you say that, and repeating what she says. So that was really funny. Also, Busy Phillips coming on and telling him that, they won't do a Dawson's Creek reunion because you never contributed to the gift for the crew, which were all rowboats, because you thought it was funny to get rowboats because our show was based on a creek. And it's just so funny. And her one-liner in it is great because he orders her like a whole roast chicken and it's like, I just don't know what women eat. And she's just like, women don't eat, they just like hide in their caves while they have their periods and then come out. and it's just like she's really funny on that one, and she does like a one-liner that you're like, I have half a mind to think that you wrote this because this is just so spot on. But that's how the show is. They really are good about heightening the reality of the characters, the reality of real life, and like in a way, like, you see it comically in Curb Your Enthusiasm of, Larry David playing himself a bit heightened and like real actors coming into it. This one is definitely a bit more like party and girly, but you still get a bit of that like people popping in and out of James Vanderbeek's world in a way that kind of would happen for people trying to get back into business. So back to seeing about the bees in our own apartments is I know currently obviously I love my roommate because it is friend of the show and boyfriend Sean. But firstly, friend of the show. But I'd say like my one like really notable roommate is I had a roommate my third year of college. It's one of my dorm mates, but she was a great roommate. Like she always like, paid everything on time, kept things clean, wanted to throw parties and stuff. Yeah. But she was just like, she had great one-liners, and like especially when we used Facebook way more now, like in the early 2000s where it was just like a stream of consciousness, like she just had these great lines that me and my other roommate would read and go like, how did you post this? But also I'm so glad she did. I specifically remember she's saying like she had this post and there was like a long paragraph before, but what stuck with me is she said like, don't call me honey, bitch. I will throw a beehive at you. And just being like, that's new.
Wow.
Haven't heard that one before.
Wow. All right. All right.
And she was like a comparative literature major, so she would have some pretty good words every once in a while. Like, I would vivisect that person, or just like, if I like made too many jokes, she'd be like, Tracy, I will cut your fingers off, and I'd be like, time to stop poking the bear. So she was a great roommate, and I remember we threw her like a K-pop themed birthday party. So like we just got to do a lot of like big brash things with her. So she was
Okay.
a good time.
That's
Yeah.
nice.
But that's like the most like, of all my roommates, most of them are a lot of my best friends. And she was a friend as well. But she's definitely the one that stood out as like people be like, I remember that roommate of yours, Tracy. Like she also used to kind of fight with one of your friends if she got a little drunk. I'd be like, yeah, that's her. She definitely like knew how to make a party like a party to remember.
She definitely sounds TV worthy. That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
pretty fun. That's fun.
Yeah. Maybe, reality TV worthy, but still.
Yeah. Well, I went the Craigslist route once.
There we go.
So that happened. It was my first time moving to the big city too. I went up to San Francisco, and it's very difficult to find a living situation up there. And so I had started school, and I was living on a friend from high school's kitchen floor for the first couple weeks, trying to nail down this place. Shout out to Thomas. Thank you for those 2 weeks. I was
going to say, I feel like it was Thomas, and we appreciate you.
Very much. Yeah, still appreciate it to this day. And I had this place, but it was this like odd, tiny little house built in 1923, and it looked like it on Holloway Street. And if you go looking for it today, you probably can't find it. Last time I was up there, it was scheduled for demolition. And
that's what you love to hear about your old living quarters.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But and you kind of noticed it, I guess, getting in. I went in. I got the room directly from someone who was moving out. And she was like, well, maybe the landlord wants someone in here. But the landlord wasn't the person I was going to deal with. I was going to deal with some realtor who didn't really talk to the landlord. Exorbitant rent for a dining room. I was one of 6. And in the living room, we were all like, there were doors to every room. But in the living room next to us were 2 girls. One worked in finance and basically used her half of the room as a glorified weight room / storage closet. And the other was a dancer. And then there was a chef in one of the bedrooms. There was someone who moved in the same day as me, a student teacher. And we kind of looked around. Nobody else was in the house. Apparently, everybody else was out of the country. And our first words to each other are we getting scammed? And then there was a guy in the basement. San Francisco houses have, they basically will just put up 3 walls wherever they can and call it a room and not put it on the brochure. This house had one of those. He was the longest running roommate in this place. And, as far as it went, myself, the student teacher, and the dancer were all relatively normal. We'd all get home at the same time and share a bottle of wine and talk about how the oven didn't work or whatever was growing in the pot or, like, who even knows who the landlord was that we had never known. It was really interesting until one day in December, the student teacher came over and he was like, all right, well, after the semester, I just want you to know they never took rent from me. I've been squatting in the bedroom and I'm out. I was like, oh, no. I booked it home and I came back to a destroyed washer and dryer in the basement and 2 new roommates. I never got their names. They referred to each other as boyfriend and girlfriend. And they basically cooked 20 for 3 weeks. I lasted 3 weeks after this. They ended up getting into fights with the guy in the basement who I really only knew from 2 occasions. One, he threw up a bunch of hot dogs in the tub and left them there for us to find in the morning. Just strange behavior. Otherwise,
if you can't win the hot dog eating contest, like it's time to tap out.
It's time to tap out, and yeah, follow your dreams. But know the consequences.
Clean up after yourself.
Exactly. He was a nice guy, though. He came home at before once. How like his face was kind of coming off, and we asked him if he was okay, and he told us he thought he got hit by a car. So he took
the
us.
face coming off was like not like a nice literary device. Like
No, this
it
is
was
literal.
coming off.
Yeah, no, his face was kind of like drooping off. He takes us down into his room and he shows us his beat making machines and talks about all the people he's lost in the city, but how he'll never leave because it's his city. I'm pretty sure he's still. Well, no, he can't be in that basement. That house is gone. Well, I hope
Yeah,
you're
I
doing
mean,
well.
don't get into fights with the basement guy.
No.
That's like rule number 1
But-
in NorCal.
And that's what I'm trying to lead up to is boyfriend and girlfriend did. And then somebody called the cops, and that is when the landlord finally decided to introduce themselves to us via the chef in a very, very, I guess pissed off is the only wording
Is
I
he
can
just
think
like
of.
pulling the strings in like a rat race way?
You
Like,
would
I just want to
think,
see what
right?
all these people do together as a nice, like, fun experiment for me. And then later he was like, oh, this went horribly wrong. Like, at first when you told me this, it seemed like a fun, like, oh, you could adapt this
And it
as a comedy.
was
And then
sometimes.
later I was like, maybe like also like Shameless.
It was, I mean, the best
Like,
way.
we're getting to some dark undertones too once the guy comes in with like the face. Where you're like,
I had
okay,
forgotten
there's some
about that until, though.
intervening moments here as well.
I mean, I will say, yeah, the best way I can describe this place is, you move to the city and your friends want to come visit you, and most of the time they wouldn't leave a night before they're scheduled to, but in this case, everybody did. It was an interesting spot, and I basically, after the landlord showed their face, I pulled them with we tried to change the rent a day after I moved in, so there's no lease. I am out, and then the chef ended up, he was going to have a kid, so slipped him the couch, and I moved in with a good friend from college, and he's still in San Francisco, so that was a wonderful experience, and that is don't trust anybody in the hallway house, I guess is my version of that. That was a great 5 months.
I know a lot of people who had like larger shared, when you got into a house where you shared it with like 6, 7, 8 people.
Mm-hmm.
That's where a lot of this stuff came out.
Oh, let's talk one restroom, by the way. But yeah.
Wow. I mean, you are very blessed that you did not live in this house in the age of the pandemic. Like, how much would that? I mean, college in general would be dreadful during this time.
Mm-hmm.
Because you'd probably be the worst. / how do you just like? It's not, college is not clean. Even if you're the cleanest person, like fun college is not clean.
That's true.
I'm just gonna say that.
True words.
Like, I kept a semi-tidy. I mean, not my first 2 years. I was still kind of a mess, but like afterwards, much better.
Mm-hmm.
But like things were always like hygienic. They just were like, I wasn't a very organized person during those first few years. I was stretching myself thin with my activities, and I was like, I'm not gonna like Marie Kondo this bedroom. I'm gonna like leave everything on the floor, deal with it tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was the classic college kid who was like, I have to put the laundry on the bed to make sure I put it away, because I can't just like, otherwise it'll just stay in the corner. Kind of thing. But I also was the kid who kept like snacks on the nightstand, like, just in case we go to bed and we need like a little snack after a night out, like keep some Wheat Thins in the nightstand, just all those things.
Of course.
But yeah, this show definitely transports you back to those questionable shared living times, or even just like your most, roommates that maybe aren't your close friends that would bring a different energy into your life.
Yeah.
You definitely get that from the show. And also the joy of when you do get a random roommate and you hit it off like you did afterwards.
Yeah, and
that part is great and magical.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, and there was sort of a camaraderie with us sort of with the three of us that would just kind of get together at night and cope. There was that. So good time. Yeah. All around, it's a fun experience, and it's always really documented well in television. And this was another one of those occurrences.
Yes. I don't know if television has documented the NorCal basement. I only know this because I visited a friend of a friend's who lived in Berkeley, and they had the basement room, and you had to use a step ladder to get down.
Yep. I've looked at a place like that. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And that's really common up there. But
they will give you a brochure that says 2 to 3 bedrooms or whatever, and you'll go look because you just want to see something that day. And the realtor will kind of show you oh, here's the butler's closet if you got a friend. We put these walls up over here. It's not on the brochure if you got another friend. We're all about student housing here, and it's wild. I agree.
There
should be a
10 Harry Potter closets for you guys.
Right?
Get the IKEA twin bed, the children's bed to be to be specific, because trust me, you're not fitting much in here, bro.
Yeah, San Francisco college living. That'd be there is a show there. There's a show there for sure. Well, yeah,
definitely. I was in Irvine, so that was a little bit more like living in apartments in the planned community. You still get some unplanned stuff, as I have experienced. So it's not all Stepford Wives, guys. We still got some twists and turns, but yeah, I think that's a wrap on Don't Trust the Bee. Really enjoyable show. Really encourage y'all to give it a watch.
Yeah, and if you have any exciting roommate stories, anything to go along with the sort of live-in in roommate situations, go ahead and give us a shout somewhere. We got info at ptptshow.com. We got a chat that we see you in tonight. We got a voicemail. Leave us a voicemail about your situation. Write us, find us. All of that stuff. This show could not have been made without the following amazing people. Thank you so much to Fen for the artwork. You can find her at FenLatte on Instagram, jwright at jwrightmusic.com. For this music playing in the background, website by Coco. Special thanks to BMAC for helping us put this episode together. And that is it on this edition of Primetime Party Time. Catch us Monday nights at 9 p.m. on ptptshow.com. I don't think there's anything else. Is there anything else, Tracy?
No, we're good.
Think of the Primetime Party Time dance to do when that song plays.
I know, it's a lot of like we're both shaking like we have maracas that we don't.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. That's exactly it. Yeah.